Hello, Algebra 2, we're in 9.6. The goal in 9.6 is to do all of the stuff we did yesterday in 9.5. Find a description, vertex, a line of symmetry, a max or min. But our issue today, if you see the problems on the board or the problems in the notes that were in your packet, the equations do not look like anything that you want the equations to look like right now. So what we are going to have to do today is roll out an old process called factoring by completing the square. So that was part of the reason I had you do the worksheet on factoring by completing the square real early on in the break. Not a break, but early on in this process because this was coming. So today we're going to have to start off by factoring by completing the square, just like we did on that worksheet. So I'll work my way through this. If this is not helpful, you can look back to the other video about factoring by completing the square to try to do it. But we need to factor by completing the square at the beginning, and then we'll build off of that the same way that we have been. So factoring by completing the square goes like this. The problem has x squared, so we're going to always just start off with that letter. Whatever the sign is, we're going to take it. And we always cut this number in half. Half of the 6 is a 3. And that makes us a square. Partly. The issue is that this is not the right number that we wanted to be there. To figure out what number that's supposed to be, we do 3 times 3, and we wished for that to be a 9. We always need for this to be an adding whatever number that would be, because anything times itself is going to give us a positive sort of result. So 4 doesn't belong, 9 is better. If we're going to upgrade from 4 to 9, we went up 5. You can't just do that unless you pay for that by subtracting 5. And we just factored by completing the square. Now we would go about doing all the same things we've been doing every day. We could write ourselves a description. This would be right 3. This would be down 5. That means it would have a vertex at the point 3, -5. That means the line of symmetry, which is always x equals, is x equals 3, because we're just stealing that number. We do a minimum point anytime it's a normal U that hasn't been flipped. This was never flipped, so it's a normal U, so that has a minimum point using the -5. And then we move on with our life. Let me do a quick walk to grab my book. I'm not sure if we're graphing. If we're graphing, I'll graph. But I don't think we are. Don't want to get your hopes up though too quickly. And the answer is no, there is no graphing. So hooray for no graphing. The director is dancing in the background. So we need to factor by completing the square and then just do that listing stuff. But the graphs have ceased for a day. So this problem goes a little less well. When we go to make our square, we have the x. We copy this sign, which happens to be a minus again, but it's 50-50. But whatever sign this is, we just copy it. Half of this, you're going to probably want to go decimal. So half of 5 is 2.5. To figure out what this is supposed to be, we have to take 2.5 times 2.5. 2.5 times 2.5 is 6.25. Unlike the previous question where we went up, from 4 to 9 we went up and then paid for it by going down. This went down. From 7 to 6.25, you went down a 0.75. Use your calculator to help you figure that out if you need to. But since this went down a 0.75, we need to go up a 0.75. And then we'll repeat the process from before. We'd be doing a description that this is right 2.5 and up 0.75. We would do a vertex of 2.5 and 0.75. We would do a line of symmetry, x equals, copy the first number. Still a min because we didn't flip, 0.75, and then we get out of there. If we go to the third one, life got a little harder again because there's a number with the x squared. So in case you don't remember the scheme for this, we have to take that number off, but only from the first two. Whether this divides evenly or not, we just have to deal with it. Okay, 2 at least here does go evenly into 10, but even if this is an 11, you'd have to just go decimal. Sorry, it's how it just goes. So these first two, we factor off a -2, get an x squared. If you take -2, divide with +10, that's a -5x. And I have an empty space on purpose that I'm going to fill, and I'm going to pay for that in a second. But that's our first initial move. Take -2 off the first two, leave -7 out of the picture for a moment. To make this a square, it's an x. It's copying that sign. Half of 5 is 2.5 again, just like it was a second ago. 2.5 makes us add in a 6.25. Adding in 6.25 is the number that could fill that gap. This times itself is how that was made. To pay for this, I'm not going to here subtract 6.25, although that's tempting. Because remember, this is still there. This is still multiplying all of these numbers in the big picture. Don't just focus here to look there. If you multiply these together, your calculator will show you this is a -12.5. We didn't really just do this. We really did a -12.5. If you multiply these on the calculator, you'd see it. To pay for -12.5, add 12.5. And then those can get put together. So description, we'd be upside down, which would get me a max. We'd go 2 times as tall. We'd go right 2.5. We'd go up 5.5. So vertex is 2.5, 5.5. Line of symmetry, x equals the first number, max from the second number. You go again, same kind of scheme. Number in front of x squared means it has to come off of those first two with -5 minding his own business out of the way. So I have an x squared minus 3x. If we divide this by this, use your calculator if you have to, that's where that came from. And I intentionally leave a gap here. When I fill that gap, I'm going to have to pay for it. So -4 creates a square, x minus, because I copy signs, 1.5, because I cut in half, always plus for my creation, 2.25, because I'm always squaring when I make this step back to fill my gap. Adding 2.25 is not going to be paid for with subtracting 2.25, because this isn't really what we did. Don't get too tunnel vision there. You have to look bigger picture. -4 can multiply this and should. -4 times my adding 2.25, calculator can help you see a -9. Adding 9 pays for that. The payment is always the opposite. So a +4. Once we clean that up, that cleans up to combine to be an add 4. And then do what we've been doing. We're flipping, which means a max. We are 4 times taller. We are right 1.5. We are up 4. So vertex would be 1.5, 4. Line of symmetry blindly is always x equals. And then you grab the first number from the vertex. Max is always the second number from the vertex. This one, there's not a number with the x squared, but there is a thing there. So we take a negative off from the first two. And anytime you do that, you leave the number at the end just out of the way. We have a gap here that'll need filled and a payment to make. So we go negative x minus 3 squared, copying the sign, half of the 6. Always plus for my created number. 9 here, because 3 times 3 is 9. But I didn't really add 9. Don't get tunnel vision. Look big picture. This, interacting with that, really makes this a -9. So add 9 for payment, and get an add 13. So we're flipped, so max. We're right 3. We're up 13. So our vertex is 3, 13. Line of symmetry, x equals. Every time x equals, 3 is our number this time from just copying. Max of 13, we're just copying. I have one more on my paper that I ran out of board space, so I'll walk to the left. So I have that. Another thing I didn't comment on that's worth a comment, sometimes I wrote y. Sometimes I wrote f of x. I've said this other days, it means the same thing. It doesn't matter. So if the homework says f of x or the homework says y, it doesn't matter either. You can mix and match those anytime you want. They're equally interchangeable. So I'll just do that for now. For this, again, number with x squared, I have to take it off. I have to take the full number with the x squared. GCF has to get factored off. So x squared plus. If there's a 2 and I divide off of 4, I'm going to have to go to a decimal or a fraction. I'm going decimal right now. I think on the notes paper I went fraction. Whatever you're more comfortable with, it's all the same. But when 2 divides by 4, you have to go fraction. It's not going to be enough to just take out a 2, because that's the normal GCF. Whatever's with the x squared, that full number has to come off, even if it makes decimals in its place. Empty space, -1, mind his own business for a while, and the payment is going to go there. 4x plus something squared. If I go half of this, I need to go to a 0.25 if we're decimals. Created numbers are always an add sign. This times itself is an 0.625. This isn't really the number, because this is going to multiply that. We have to think big picture. 4 times this is an add 0.25, so I would need to subtract 0.25. And the grand total of that is negative 1.25. So we go 4 times taller, no flip, so min. Left 0.25, down 1.25, so negative 0.25, negative 1.25. X equals the negative 0.25, min of negative 1.25. Let me re-talk one more problem. Okay, let's say this one in a redo mode. I didn't do any examples with a positive number there that worked better. So we'll take that off and then we'll rethink. So if this just had a positive 2, taking off the 2 would have left out a plus. Would have made this a plus. When we multiplied these, the 12.5 would have been a positive 12.5. I would have to subtract 12.5 to pay for that and get a negative 19.5, which would have been down 19.5, negative 19.5, negative 19.5. So if there's a positive number that comes off naturally, it would be more like that one, and that should pretty much run the gamut of examples, because I did an X with whole numbers, I did an X with decimals. I have a positive number here that came off well, I have a positive number that came off not well, and then I had a couple negative examples, just a negative, and then another one with a negative and a number, so that should pretty well do you for possibilities. There's not a ton of homework on these. There's a 1 to 12. So we're looking to factor by completing the square, and then going at it. So if you have trouble, email me and we'll talk another time by video conference somehow.